Yeah.
Because as we know now, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And I could see the same kind of devastation that happened to Rowena would be the same kind of impact if it was, say, Tye Valley. And the town of Tye Valley, right, where they have some of the same septic issues and water infrastructure issues. So I think there's kind of 4 key areas that we should be like really fully preparing for ahead of time and having these conversations ahead of time, but addressing in terms of resilience.
Welcome to the CCC News podcast. Today, we welcome Lisa Gambee to the podcast. She is running against John Grant, Nicole Beekler, and Rob Van Cleve for the Wasco County Commissioner, position number 1, in a pretty competitive field there, as we have two seats up for election in the Wasco County Board of Commissioner races. So, thanks for coming today, Lisa. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
You bet. Lisa enters the race with extensive experience inside county government and roots in rural Wasco County. She's from Tye Valley and previously served for nearly a decade as Wasco County Clerk, a role that placed her at the center of elections, public records, and key administrative functions. And I've ran into you multiple times on election nights and always appreciated your service, Lisa.
Thanks.
During her time as clerk, she oversaw the administration of local elections and worked across departments, giving her a working knowledge of county operations, budgeting processes, and how decisions impact residents across both rural and urban communities. Before entering public service, Gambee built a career in brand strategy and entrepreneurship. Experience she has had helps inform her approach to communication, organization, and long-term planning.
Yep.
Throughout her campaign, she has emphasized transparency, accountability, and strengthening trust between local government and residents. She has also highlighted the importance of preparing the county for growth, infrastructure demands, and emergency preparedness. With a background that combines hands-on county government experience and private sector strategy, along with ties to rural Wasco County, Gambee is positioning herself as a candidate focused on informed decision-making, collaborative leadership, and maintaining public confidence as the county navigates a period of change and opportunity. So welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, let's just jump right into it. I'm going to talk about housing to begin with.
Yeah. Hot topic.
And so we're it's not uncommon to talk to anybody in the county or to talk to folks who are looking for housing who are having trouble either affording it or even finding a place. It's one of the most urgent problems. A proposal has been floated for the county to help finance projects such as Mary Hanlon's Basalt Commons through a loan or similar tool. Would you support the county using public financing tools such as loans, guarantees, or revolving housing funds to accelerate projects like the Basalt Commons?
So I have to admit, Basalt Commons is on the BOCC schedule for tomorrow. And so I had a chance to look at the board packet and kind of and see what's being proposed, which is that the county purchased the property and then leases it back to Mary Hanlon and her group. So there's a lot of information in that contract. I didn't have time to read through all of it, but part of it at the end does give some of their justification for the commissioners of why they would support that. One of which is, it is a tight housing market and it's a tight rental market. And so having additional housing in the area is beneficial for sure. Because at the clerk's office with us recording all of the deeds and that kind of stuff, we could see how the house prices were, right? And so it's definitely a need. I think what would have been more interesting was if it was an affordable housing project. My understanding of it is that it's a private developer.
Yes.
And this won't necessarily be rental rates that are helping, people who are just working and living here and already kind of getting priced out of the house market. So it would have been nice to have a more of a affordable housing component to it, which I don't think there is. But it's definitely been very interesting reading in the concept behind why the county might purchase the property and then lease it back as a way to get the project across the starting line.
Yeah. So it's about 116 units, I believe.
That's what it says.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's going to be built on the Griffith Motors site, which is downtown across the street from Ace Hardware, Sawyer's Hardware. And so do you think the addition of that many units helps the overall housing market?
Well, I think it helps the rental market. I would, part of the proposal is that it's people that can rent there and then walk to the services they need. And I have to say, if you've ever spent any time in the Dalles, right, summers are hot and winters are cold. And I'm thinking, well, is somebody really going to walk from Basalt Commons over to Safeway or Fred Meyer to do their grocery shopping? They're going to want to drive. And so part of it might be, well, what's the parking issue? Is there going to be enough parking, or is that going to kind of exacerbate some of the downtown parking? So I think having additional rental units is good because the rental market is tight. Whether that's the appropriate package, it'd be kind of hard to say, but given the justifications, I can see why the commissioners are accepting it. If I had not known or read some of those documents, with the little bit I have, part of being county clerk is that you always had to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And so my mind tends to go to, well, what's the worst case scenario here, right? One of which would have been for me, what happens if this all goes through? And 2 years into the project, costs have skyrocketed to the degree that it's not feasible to finish it. And where does that leave the county if that building isn't finished? And now they're property owner of a partially finished building. I'm sure there's guarantees that are in the agreement. And again, I didn't read the entire document yet, but those would be some of the concerns I would have about a project like that and the county's involvement without it having a direct public benefit like affordable housing.
Yeah, very good. Well, as I understand it, it's like about a 5-year agreement where they would buy the property and lease it back to Mary and then pay it off over time with incremental increases. But the county would actually earn some money on that project if it all went exactly according to what's been proposed. So that would be good.
It's like a 35-year lease, and the first 5 years, it's just kind of locked into neither party. The amount of the lease is set. The county can't sell the property, so that it gives 5 years. I'm assuming 5 years to establish things getting up and running. And if it does all go according to plan, then yes, the county would end up making money on the project, probably better than they could do if they were just trying to do a straight investment of funds.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, I'm going to jump into a more general discussion about housing, and we talked about levers a little bit ago. So,
yes.
But what do you think is the single most effective policy lever a county commissioner can pull through? Is it zoning or use land use changes, incentives, partnerships? How do we increase affordable housing?
Right. So I had a chance to sit down with Karen Long from Mid-Columbia Housing Authority.
Okay.
And find out more about the organization. And, Phil Brady is really kind of the expert on this, but we had a great conversation, and she said, I asked her straight out, like, what is it that the county could do to help the organization the most in terms of getting affordable project housing going? And she said, really having affordable land made available. So they need land that is, it's affordable, it's buildable. And if they had those costs that were kind of already picked up in terms of the project, then their focus is really on the construction of the housing itself.
Okay.
And so the county has multiple properties that they have. We also have tax foreclosed properties. And so I think one of the things the county could and should do is look at saying, can we make those properties available to Mid-Columbia Housing Authority, working with either the city or if it's outside of the city, on our own, to find properties that are available. And then what they do is they take the property. So unlike Basalt Commons, where the county will hold the property and lease it back, the way that affordable housing works is they take that property and they put it into a community land trust model. Mm-hmm. And that takes the land out of any kind of ownership. And then what the affordable housing tenant is doing is they're getting their economic benefit from the increase of the value of the house itself.
Yeah.
But they can never sell, they can't sell it at a profit. The land remains as a public benefit and makes it possible for future generations to still continue to have affordable housing at that location.
So somebody moves in and can build up equity, use that equity to move into, say, a bigger house or a house that's
different house.
Yeah, different housing.
And then but because of how the property is held itself, then it makes it affordable for the next generation coming in to still have it be affordable.
It's still within reach.
Yeah. So that was the model that she said that is kind of being moved to, and I think it makes a lot of sense because then it is that future generation benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Chad over at Habitat for Humanity was talking me through that a little bit ago. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I could see them using that approach as well.
Good, interesting idea.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, let's jump from housing and we'll go right into wildfires. So we had a pretty rough year last year, especially with folks losing their homes up in the Rowena area. And we had evacuations for thousands of residents and destroyed dozens of structures near the Dalles. Is there some specific investments or policy changes you would prioritize to ensure Wasco County is better prepared for the next large wildfire? Things like evacuation or fuel reduction or infrastructure protection?
Yeah. So I have some specific ideas, which is why I have my notes with me, because I'm like, it's not just a generalization of what would you do. I think what you're asking with the podcast is what would you actually do or what do you actually think about?
Yeah.
Wildfire resilience is one of my hot topics because our property was in the Larch Creek fire back in July of 2024.
Shadowbrook or something in that area?
Shady Brook, Road in Tye Valley. And so, that fire was very different because it really kind of slowly crept down. And then it was clear that the properties were going to be under stress. But there was time for the county to call a conflagration and bring in additional support. Right?
Yeah.
So we had a truck full of water, a fire truck, right? Uh-huh. 2 firefighters and a tank full of water, and they wait right until the fire comes down to your property, and then they kind of clear this green path around your house to save your structures. Wow. But the fire continues on through the rest of the property, right? Mm-hmm. That's very different. What happened in Rowena was really kind of a wake-up call, right? Because with those gorge winds, that sparked, and next thing you know, it just took off, right? And so the devastation there was vastly different and way more intense. And so I think that it's not even just the issues of all of the homes that are lost and the structures and the impact to water infrastructure and resilience, but then you have these subsequent effects of what's going to happen with potential landslides or contamination of water, septic issues, right?
Yes.
So there's both pre-fire planning that needs to be done.
Okay.
But there's also post-recovery work that has to be done, including those subsequent issues that, what happens if we do get a landslide because now there's no vegetation, right? Yeah. So I think the county has done an amazing job of putting together the resources for Rowena recovery, and it's just kind of a hindsight is 2020. What I would hope is that those lessons are being used to plan for the upcoming fire season.
Yeah.
Because as we know now, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Yeah. And I could see the same kind of devastation that happened to Rowena would be the same kind of impact if it was, say, Tye Valley. And the town of Tye Valley, right, where they have some of the same septic issues and water infrastructure issues. So I think there's kind of 4 key areas that we should be like really fully preparing for ahead of time and having these conversations ahead of time, but addressing in terms of resilience.
Okay.
So the first is water reliability and system hardening. So thinking about things like with Rowena, can you protect the pump stations? Do you have backup power? Is there watershed protection, or is the watershed open to the ravages of the fire, right? And then do you have redundancy? To be able to continue to provide that water. Second one is road access and evacuation readiness. One of the things that is interesting is, when you get that level 3 go, right? Like you need to know where to go. Like you need to know how to get out of my neighborhood. There's one way in and one way out, right? From a certain part of where I live, right? Unless you go up through the forest land itself. So having really defined evacuation routes that people are aware of and know to do, it's a little bit like tsunami warning at the coast, right? Yeah. You're in the tsunami zone, you're out of the tsunami zone, but really, the emergency manager has been working with the cities to develop those. And, I think they need to be released to the public and really have people understand ahead of time, where do I go if I'm part of that fire? Okay. And then emergency communication and preparedness, the ability to have been signed up for, it was Citizen Alert Everbridge when I was going through the fire, right? And you can choose how you want to get your notifications, right? Yeah. But you need to make sure you can get those notifications. So depending on where you are for cell coverage, right? You may or may not be getting the message. And also, are those messages being prepared and distributed in a language that makes sense to the homeowners or the residents that are there? And then pairing that with having the homeowners be prepared. So the Ready, Set, Go is great, but what are the other things that are being done to help prepare homeowners ahead of time of how to respond accurately and how to minimize the risk and the damage that happens to their property? I think some of the things that have been great, Wasco County has a wildfire coordinator now, and so there are regular events that are happening so that homeowners can attend and figure out, what do I need to do to make sure that my property, that I'm doing what I can to make sure my property is safe. And then the last one, of course, is fuel reduction, which sounds weird. Yeah. That might mean, move the tank of gas away from your house. Right. But what it really means is in the forest, forest health and watershed health. So out in our area, some of the work that's being done is kind of on two fronts. One is controlled burns, where they specifically set fire to an area to burn out the undergrowth and try and open up the forest. Fortunately, they've been doing a much better job about communicating that, because in our area now, people see smoke. Yeah. And they're immediately like
911. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what's going on? Right. Does anybody know what this is about? Yeah. Right. So so that's good to be preparing for that. So those are kind of the four key areas, and it really is like, it's a public safety issue, and does decisions that we make as a county make fire threatened communities feel safer? Yeah,
I think you touched on a little bit of this, but talking about rural areas and such, like rural fire protection districts and water drinking districts, potable water districts. Like for example, Wamak, the Wamak Rural Fire Protection District has got a measure on for a tax base coming up in this primary, actually. So. Yes. But what as a county commissioner, what do you believe the county should be doing in regards to supporting rural fire protection districts and water districts and that kind of thing? What is the county's obligation in your mind?
So rural communities, they should be able to have reliable fire and EMS services. Right. And pretty much districts have kind of been left to fend for themselves. And they were never meant to be based on bake sales and volunteer help. Right. It was really supposed to be that there was funded as essential public safety. And I'm not sure why that didn't happen. I think probably a lack of the wildfire sensitivity that there is there now, right, combined with no more taxes, right? I think that public sentiment is shifting, and I think that's why the Wamak Rural Fire Protection District going for this measure is going to be a really interesting barometer of how much that sentiment has changed, because having local stable funding is really kind of should be the first foundation of any kind of fire and EMS support. Beyond that, we should be pairing those local dollars with state and federal grants. So what's kind of missing is that foundation of the local dollars. Right now, most of the fire departments that are rural protection fire departments, they rely heavily on grants from both state and federal level to help provide the training, to have equipment, all of that kind of stuff. But grants come and go.
Right.
And so I think that having a regional coordination and kind of a unified approach from the county in saying, here's the issues that all of these districts are facing, what are the common needs, and how can we maybe use that to strengthen the message to state and federal funding that we need better support here. I think that's one of the things that the county can and should be doing, is figuring out how can we help bring those resources to the table, which is a basic concept of what commissioners do in this role, right? Is just what is all of the resources that we can bring to the table, and then figure out where the gaps are. And that would be kind of one of the last things, is just supporting that volunteer recruitment and retention. We need to figure out how to have a stable pipeline of people that are willing to come and serve in that role, or figure out how to fund that role, right? But figuring out a stable pipeline and how you train people and make that feasible, because I'm at the end of the boomer generation, right? And the need is only going to increase, right? Until probably my generation passes. So I think figuring that out is a really critical thing to do. And, again, it's a core public safety responsibility. So I think the county needs to be supporting that, even though at first glance, it's like, well, that's not our jurisdiction. No, but it's our communities.
Fair enough. Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit about data centers. Google's data centers have become the county's largest taxpayer and a major economic force. The latest data center brought on by Google paid taxes last year was $9.8 million in fees and property taxes. Pretty big chunk of money, largest obviously taxpayer. How should Wasco County balance the economic benefits of large industrial investments like data centers with concerns about water use, infrastructure demands, and transparency and tax incentives?
Right. So I'm gonna include solar farms in this kind of those larger industrial based employers or taxpayers, right? So
which we have several over, like just bake oven and some of those just open and
and another huge one that is under. It's currently under review with the Oregon Department of Energy. So that's one that's up on Juniper Flat area.
Okay.
And so part of it is, one of the things that happens is, yes, there could be a fair amount of money that comes in, that revenue that's generated from those kinds of industrial type projects. But the balance on it needs to be that the communities that are bearing that employer or that company, right, are they benefiting from a reinvestment of that revenue where those impacts occur? Because they're the ones that are having the impacts of the water, the infrastructure, demand on roads, emergency services, all of that. So first and foremost is, here in the Dalles, data center revenue should be looking at supporting infrastructure that this community is supporting. Same thing out in South County where there's the solar farms, right? Is where is the money coming from that to reinvest in the communities and the burdens that those communities bear from having that?
Okay.
I think that we need to look at really increasing the transparency of what's coming in and what the benefits are that the communities are getting from these types of industrial projects. And, I think there's been kind of a lack of transparency. I don't know about you, but some of the tax abatement programs are pretty hard to figure out, well, what is that formula and how much is coming in and where is it going and what is the benefit it's being used for?
Right.
I certainly know that when you look at it from the county perspective, the city's done a pretty good job of trying to outline what that value is.
Yeah.
With the county, it's harder because it comes into the budget, and I think it's just going into reserve funds. And so it's hard to tell, well, how much is coming in and how much is it being used. I'm sure that the county would absolutely say that Basalt Commons and the investment they're making in that is one of the reasons behind doing it, because it's an investment in housing in this area.
Right.
So, but being clear and transparent about that is going to make people feel better about, well, what are the trade-offs that are happening, but also just highlighting what is the benefit that's happening.
Yeah.
Because there are benefits. If the data centers had never been here, the county would look, the Dalles and the county would look very different than they do right now. I do think that we need to make sure that we're protecting those water resources and the infrastructure capacity, because we didn't really talk about water infrastructure per se yet, and I don't know that we need to go back, but really it does need to be, it's a fundamental right to have drinking water, right? And it's an economic viability issue, right? If you don't have drinking water, you don't have residents, you don't have property taxes, you don't have, a whole host of things. And so I think City of the Dalles is doing the right thing in looking at, okay, how do we plan for now and the future, and how do we reserve or conserve the water that we've already got coming into our system, right?
Yes.
And in what I've seen in the articles that have been talked about, the city retains those water rights. And so that's where the difference is, in that, eventually the economic development must serve the people, and that needs to be at the forefront. I think that it's a public resource, and protecting it must come first over a private expansion.
Okay.
So it may be that 6 data centers is about the limit of what the community infrastructure can handle.
Okay.
And we might need some diversity, and maybe it's time to say no and look at other opportunities. But having a way to kind of evaluate with employers, what are the trade-offs, right? Here's the benefits, but here's the concerns, and what does that look like at a net value? I think that's important.
Well, very good. Very good. Well, you've touched on this too in your last comments, but within that last payment for the data center on the last, there was the GAP funds. So those are shared between the city and the county in the latest agreement, and that was $5.75 million that came in 2025, half going to the city, half going to the county. So my question then is what specific industries or how should that money be used? Essentially, how should it be used and spent? And if you're thinking economically, are there some specific industries or things that, Wasco County should be looking at pretty closely that you're aware of that might really diversify our economy here?
Yeah, so
2 questions, right?
So you want to tackle...
Let's talk about diversifying the economy, if you have any ideas on that.
Yeah. So I think that... one of the things is that it is tough having a few large employers or companies that are contributing because it does, as other candidates have said, it contributes to that boom-bust kind of cycle, right? And so having a diversified economy is important. And I think one of the things that needs to be kept at the foundation of all of that is looking at what the infrastructure is, right? Can we make sure that we are supporting, we've got beautiful rivers, we've got great outdoor resources, and that's kind of a foundation of the growth. So those are economic assets as well, and we need to make sure that we have enough water, that we have enough viability, and that we're protecting the resources we already have as a foundation.
Okay.
Beyond that, I would love to see that a couple of strategies employed. One is that we have small businesses and downtown vitality. So one of the things that is interesting both about small towns and cities is, where do people go to gather? Mm-hmm. Right. Like, do you have a central plaza where people might gather? Do you have a town square?
Yeah.
Right. Is there a place where people can be meeting and getting to know each other, or meeting new people? And that's out of a third space of, I'm either at home or I'm at work. Yeah. I've got this other thing, along with beautification. Right. I mean, I had an interesting conversation with Rich Mays about beautification and how that actually appeals to economic interest, right, and growth, because people want to be located and live where they feel beautiful, they feel good about the space where they are, right? Yeah. So I would love to see us continue to support small businesses and entrepreneurs. Doofer has a new bakery. Antelope has a new Dark Sky initiative. Yep. And those are, new and interesting ways of making sure, how do we make sure that we don't have empty storefronts? Because there really isn't anything that says more like economic on the edge than seeing empty storefronts, right? Yeah. And I think the Dalles has had that, kind of been plagued by that for a long time, and it's kind of coming out of that now.
I would agree. Yeah.
I think that we also need to grow. There's some industry clusters. The Wasco County has the Economic Development Commission, and they have a strategic plan that is a 5-year strategic plan. And there's a really great blueprint in it for increasing economic growth and resiliency. And so it includes things like tech, renewable energy, outdoor recreation, and value-added agriculture. That we could invest in value-added agriculture. So is there food processing or specialty crops or farm-to-market infrastructure that could be explored? And that kind of builds on the strengths we already have in our community of being both agriculturally based and having strong agricultural economic growth. Yeah. But we're also have that advantage of being on a lot of really critical transportation. So you've got this kind of combination of beautiful scenery and countryside, value in your agriculture, combined with some tech, right? Yeah. And then the ability to have this transportation system that makes it easy to do business in the Dalles or export from the Dalles if you're going to other areas. Gotcha. So I think that that kind of economic resilience, it needs to be community driven, because what works in Maupin doesn't necessarily work in the Dalles, and what works in Mosier doesn't work in Antelope. Right. But having that kind of diversified structure that says, okay, we can plug these strategies into these communities and get that best mix. Yep. And that's what I would see doing with economic development.
Okay, great. And is that where you would put, like when we talked about spending, the money that's coming in from data centers and that kind of thing? Is that where were you saying that maybe some money should be put towards that, or do you have any ideas on how?
I have different ideas on the Google Gap funds.
Let me ask you 2 questions at once. I'm going to ask you about that one, but also the high school question about, do we need a new high school in the Dalles, and what is the county's role in helping the school district? We're kind of getting a little short on time here, so yeah.
So Google funds, I do think I'll just shorten that up.
Yeah.
There are funds that go into their direct tax revenue, right? And that money gets spent very differently. It's part of the general fund for the county. Right. The county has the departments that manage those funds and kind of holds each of their own reserves within them so that they can do long-term planning, right? The gap funds that you've been talking about are ones that are kind of outside of that structure and can be used for a variety of, there's more flexibility with how those dollars can be spent. like I said, I think right now that money has just been coming into county reserves. And even the National Association of Counties says that when you're talking about rainy day funds, you need to have enough to be making sure that you're covering your risk. But if you have too much, that means that you're probably not making the investments in infrastructure and community needs that you should be doing. Okay. So I would like to see some of those funds being used to reinvest. If you look at the community enhancement project list that was put together by Mid-Columbia Development District, like 9 of the top 10 are all infrastructure, and most of them are water related. So I would really love to have it be where, when it comes to water, we have pulled together every single resource that we can bring to bear. And then what we're using is some of those gap funds to get projects over the finish line or up to the starting line, across the starting line, maybe in some cases, right? So that it's a very specific targeted use, because costs are only going up, right? And we can't afford to wait in some cases to get something up and off the ground before it's just a long-term, again, economic sustainability. And so that's water and fire resiliency are 2 areas where I would definitely see looking at where do we need to have more impact using potentially those Google gap dollars.
Okay, very good.
So,
and what are your thoughts on the county? Where does the county, where does the county commissioner stand? Like, where would you stand, like, in regards to the school district and helping that project along and improving their physical structures and such? Right.
So building a new school is really a community's investment in its future. And especially for the kids that are going through it, it's both an economic issue in having people attracted to the area. They want good schools for their kids. But it's also important for the kids in terms of being future workers in the area and also getting out of poverty. I mean, education is so important for that front. So I don't think there's anybody in the school district here in the Dalles that would say they don't think that there's a good reason to invest in the community. I think it's where the money comes from and where that burden gets placed, and a lack of trust perhaps about how that money is being spent that has kept it from getting across the finish line or even across the starting line, right? And so I think, again, the role that the commissioners can play in that is really helping to bring people to the table as kind of a neutral party, right? Helping to create communication that makes it really clear and transparent about what's going on, but also bringing those state partners like Oregon Department of Education, right? Who's getting money, their own money from Google. Like, the whole idea, I think, is how can we reduce every single cost that we can, or cover those costs so that it's not on the burden of the taxpayers in the district to absorb the entire cost of that. How can we make it as feasible as possible? And I think the commissioners can help have a role in bringing all of that to the table.
Oh, very good. Yeah. I mean, then last election, I think the last bond went down by 375 people or something. It was pretty close.
It was close. And I think, again, it's still that there's, I think there's a lack of understanding even for people that when they hear that Google, has all of this money that's going into the tax structure, thinking that that's going directly to the school district here, which it doesn't, right? It goes to the state, and then the state redistributes it.
Correctly.
And so they do get some money directly, but again, so I think that's why there's some both misunderstanding and distrust of, how are we going to make this feasible? Because I can't afford to have another $500 a year added to my taxes, right? Or even maybe $300 or whatever. So how can we get it close enough to really say, okay, let's eliminate the bulk of the burden on the taxpayers that we can and figure out how to make this work.
Excellent.
So
all right.
Right.
Very good.
So you only had to kind of check me once on like, let's be talking about time. I warned you.
That's how it goes. Lisa, thank you so much for coming in today, giving us an interview, and best of luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
We'll
I'm
be seeing you
excited
soon.
about it. It's a lot of work, but it's really been great to meet so many people and prepare, and I'm ready to get to work if I get elected commissioner.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.